Black Mamba. The two words hung in the air like a death sentence. Corporal Jake Mitchell's smirk died on his face. His hand, which had been so confidently gripping the woman's military ID card, began to tremble. Around them, the mess hall noise faded to nothing. The woman sitting across from him, the one he'd just accused of stolen valor in front of 30 Marines, didn't blink, didn't flinch, just held his gaze with eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine. And in that moment, Jake Mitchell realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Before we dive into this incredible true story, please hit that subscribe button and stay with us until the very end. Comment below with your city so we can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The cafeteria line at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar moved with its usual Thursday afternoon rhythm. Trays sliding on metal rails, the hiss of industrial fryers. Conversations layered over each other in that particular pitch that happens when hundreds of voices compete in an enclosed space. Nobody was paying attention to much of anything except the food and their own immediate circle. Major Elena Rodriguez carried her tray toward the back corner of the dining area. She'd learned years ago to eat at off-peak hours when possible, but today's flight schedule had pushed lunch into the worst possible window. The place was packed. She found a small two-seater table near the windows overlooking the flight line and sat down with her back to the wall. Old habit. Always know your exits. She was halfway through her first bite of chicken when she felt the attention shift in her direction. 3 tables over, Corporal Jake Mitchell nudged his buddy. "Check it out. Someone's wife is playing dress-up." His friend Lance Corporal Danny Ortiz glanced over. "What are you talking about?" Mitchell gestured with his chin toward Elena. "The chick in the red jacket. Look at all those patches. Bet her husband's a pilot and she thinks wearing his gear makes her cool." Ortiz squinted. "Man, you don't know that. Maybe she's what, a pilot?" Mitchell laughed. "Come on, look at her." Private First Class Tommy Chen. The youngest of the group shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just eat our food." But Mitchell was already standing. He had an audience now. 2 other nearby tables had started listening. This was the kind of thing that earned you points in the barracks later, a good story about putting some civilian in their place. He walked over with that particular swagger young infantrymen develop right after boot camp. That walk that says they own every space they enter. Elena saw him coming in her peripheral vision but didn't look up. She cut another piece of chicken. Mitchell stopped beside her table and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Ma'am, that's quite a jacket you've got there." Elena chewed, swallowed, took a sip of water. Then she raised her eyes to meet his. Her expression was neutral, pleasant even. "Thank you." The response threw him for half a second. He'd expected something else. Defensiveness, maybe. Or that flustered look civilians get when confronted by someone in uniform. "You a big fan of naval aviation?" he asked. His tone carried just enough edge to let his buddies know this was a setup. "You could say that." Her voice was calm, even. Mitchell grinned. He was playing to his audience now. "Right on. Well, see, we all got our call signs around here. It's kind of a pilot thing." He gestured vaguely toward the flight line beyond the windows. "I'm betting a cool jacket like that comes with a cool call sign. What do they call you?" He paused for effect. His friends were watching. This was the moment. "Top Gun's girlfriend." Laughter erupted from his table. The joke landed exactly as intended. Sharp, dismissive. The kind of comment designed to put someone in their place. Elena set her fork down. The movement was precise, controlled. She looked directly at him without blinking. Black Mamba. The name hung in the air between them. Mitchell's grin faltered. Just for a second. But it was there, that flicker of confusion. The answer was too specific, too immediate. Not what he'd built this whole interaction to handle. Black Mamba, he repeated slowly. That's a good one. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. Too loud. His buddies were still watching. He couldn't back down now. "Seriously though, ma'am." He straightened up, dropping the casual lean. "That's an official flight jacket. A government-issued item. You can get in a lot of trouble for wearing stuff you're not supposed to be wearing on a military installation. It's a UCMJ thing. Elena picked up her fork again. I'm aware of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Corporal. Are you? The question landed like a slap. Mitchell's face reddened. What I'm aware of, he said, voice rising slightly, is that stolen valor is a serious offense, and that name tape says Taylor. Rodriguez, Elena corrected quietly. Taylor is my maiden name. I keep it on my flight gear. He barreled forward, ignoring her. And those patches. He pointed at the circular emblem on her right shoulder. That's VMFAT 101, the sharpshooters. They're a Hornet training squadron, fleet replacement. He straightened up, gaining confidence from his own knowledge. So you're telling me you're a Hornet pilot? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. At the table behind Mitchell, Master Sergeant Victor Kane had been trying to enjoy his burger in peace. He'd been in the Corps for 27 years. He'd seen every flavor of stupid this organization had to offer. Young Marines doing young Marine things. Usually he let it play out unless someone was about to get hurt. But something about this exchange made him look up. He studied the woman at the table. The red jacket wasn't just any instructor jacket. It was the specific shade used at MAUTS 1. Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron 1. The schoolhouse. The place where they forged the best of the best. And those patches. Kane set down his burger. Elena took another bite of chicken. I've spent time with the sharpshooters, she said. Spent time, Mitchell echoed. Right, like what a tour a family day. Like 2 years as a replacement instructor. That should have stopped him. Would have stopped anyone with sense. But Mitchell had momentum now, and pride makes men stupid. Okay, look. He dropped the pretense of politeness. Let's see some ID. If you're authorized to be wearing that gear, you'll have a CAC card that says so. Without a word, Elena reached into the pocket on her flight suit's left thigh. She pulled out a slim wallet and extracted her common access card. She held it out. Mitchell snatched it. He looked down, expecting vindication, expecting to see a dependent ID card or maybe a contractor badge. Something that would prove his point. The card was green. Active duty officer. The name read Rodriguez Elena M. The rank read 04, Major. The cold feeling in Mitchell's stomach was immediate and nauseating, but his pride was a stubborn animal. He couldn't just hand it back. Not in front of everyone. Not after he'd made such a public challenge. This could be fake, he said. The words sounded weak even to him. The photo's a little grainy. Elena's expression didn't change. It was taken at the Deer's office in Yuma. Their camera is terrible. But the chip works. There's a scanner at the chow line entrance if you'd like to verify it. She was calling his bluff. Mitchell's mind raced. Every option felt like a trap. Back down and lose face. Press forward and potentially dig himself deeper. He chose forward. What about this? He tapped the patch over her heart. A smaller, intricate design featuring a delta wing aircraft with crosshairs. This is a WTI patch. You know what that is? His voice took on a lecturing tone. Defensive. Aggressive. Weapons and tactics instructor. That's the best of the best. You get that at MAUTS 1. 7 weeks of absolute hell. You don't just get one of those. You earn it. With blood and sweat and more flying hours than most pilots see in 5 years. As his finger touched the patch, something shifted in Elena's eyes. For just a moment, she wasn't in the mess hall anymore. The darkness below was absolute. No moon, no lights. Just the vast emptiness of the desert floor somewhere north of Al-Assad. The only illumination came from her cockpit instruments, red glow painting everything in hellish tones, and the sudden terrifying blooms of anti-aircraft fire rising to meet her. Viper 1, this is Reaper 2. We are taking effective fire. Winchester on flares. Say again, Winchester on flares. The voice in her headset was tight, controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. 12 Marines on the ground, surrounded, running out of countermeasures. Reaper 2 Black Mamba, pop smoke on your position. I'm coming in dry. Black Mamba, you're danger close. We're talking 25 meters. Reaper 2, do you want to go home tonight? A pause. Then, yes, ma'am. Then pop that smoke and keep your heads down. The memory released her. The mess hall snapped back into focus. Mitchell was still talking, still touching her patch with that dismissive finger. Across the room, Master Sergeant Kane was standing now, his burger forgotten. He was staring at the patches on Elena's jacket with growing recognition. VMFAT 1001. The WTI badge. And a third patch, a subdued unit insignia from a deployment rotation. That specific combination was rare, almost unique. Then he saw the name tape again. Rodriguez. And he'd heard the call sign the corporal had mocked. Black Mamba. Kane's blood went cold. He knew that name, not personally, but he knew the story. Every Marine aviator knew the story. It was the kind of thing they told new pilots to scare them straight. The kind of thing senior enlisted used as an example of what perfect execution looked like under impossible pressure. But most people thought it was exaggerated. War stories always grew in the telling. Except Kane had met one of those 12 Marines, Staff Sergeant Luis Mendoza, Recon, a man who didn't exaggerate anything, who'd looked Kane in the eye and said, "She flew like physics was a suggestion, like the whole world bent around her will. We should all be dead, every single one of us, but she wouldn't let it happen." Kane started walking toward the confrontation. His movement caught the attention of several other senior enlisted Marines. When a master sergeant moves with purpose, people notice. Mitchell was still going. "I'm serious. This patch represents Corporal Mitchell." The voice cut through the mess hall noise like a blade. Kane's voice, not shouting, somehow worse than shouting. Mitchell turned. "Master Sergeant, I was just step away from that officer. Now." The word officer hit Mitchell like cold water. He looked back at Elena, then at the CAC card still in his hand, then back at Kane. Master Sergeant, I was just checking her authorization to..." "I said now, Corporal." Mitchell took 2 steps back. His friends at his original table had gone completely silent. The nearby conversations had died. Everyone was watching. Kane moved to Elena's table. He didn't look at Mitchell. He looked at her. Really looked. At the patches. At the name tape. At her face, which showed no anger, no vindication, just calm patience. "Major," Kane said quietly, "I apologize for this interruption to your meal." Elena shook her head slightly. "It's not your apology to make, Master Sergeant. Maybe not, ma'am, but I'm making it anyway." He turned to Mitchell. The younger Marine was pale now. Understanding was dawning. And with it, horror. "Give the Major her identification card back," Kane said. Mitchell's hand shook as he held it out. Elena took it without comment. "Master Sergeant," Mitchell started. I thought..." "What you thought," Kane interrupted, "is that you saw someone you could disrespect without consequences. You saw someone you decided didn't belong, and you made that decision based on exactly nothing but your own assumptions." The mess hall was dead silent now. 50-60 people watching this unfold. "Do you know what a WTI patch means, Corporal?" "Yes, Master Sergeant, I just said..." "No. Do you actually know what it means? Not the words, the reality behind it." Mitchell swallowed. "It means weapons and tactics instructor." "It means..." Kane set his voice carrying to every corner of the room that this officer spent 7 weeks at the Marine Corps' most advanced aviation warfare school. It means she was evaluated by the finest combat pilots in the world. It means she was tested on everything from air-to-air combat to close air support to forward air control. It means she had to prove she could teach other pilots to survive in combat. He paused. And at the end of that 7 weeks, when most pilots wash out, she was good enough that they gave her that patch. And then they asked her to come back and teach. Mitchell looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Kane pointed at another patch. "You see that unit insignia? That's from a deployment rotation with Marine Aircraft Group 11. Operation Inherent Resolve. You know where that was, Corporal?" "Iraq, Master Sergeant." "Iraq and Syria. Close air support missions. Combat." Kane's voice dropped lower. "And that call sign you laughed at, Black Mamba, that's not something you pick for yourself. That's something you earn. Usually in circumstances other people don't survive." The main doors to the mess hall banged open. Sergeant Major Richard Voss walked in with the bearing of a man who'd been interrupted during important work. Behind him came Colonel James Harrison, the wing commander. The energy in the room shifted again. When the sergeant major shows up, it's serious. When the wing commander shows up with him, someone's career is about to end. They walked directly to Elena's table. Sergeant Major Voss took one look at the scene: Kane standing at parade rest, Mitchell looking like he might vomit. Elena sitting calmly with her partially eaten meal and understood the situation immediately. "Master Sergeant Kane," Voss said. "Report." Kane's voice was parade ground perfect. Sergeant Major Corporal Mitchell publicly challenged Major Rodriguez's authorization to wear her flight gear. He demanded identification. He accused her of stolen valor. I intervened when I recognized the situation. Voss turned his gaze on Mitchell. If Kane's voice had been a blade, Voss's stare was a hammer. "Is this accurate, Corporal?" Mitchell's voice came out strangled. "Sergeant Major, I thought she was..." "I asked you a yes or no question, Corporal." "Yes, Sergeant Major." Voss nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out a chair and sat down at Elena's table. Casual, like they were old friends catching up. "Major Rodriguez," he said. "How's your chicken?" Elena blinked. Once. "Dry, Sergeant Major." "It's always dry on Thursday. I don't know why. Been that way for 3 years. He looked at Mitchell. "The corporal here seems to have questions about your qualifications. I thought maybe I could help answer them. Would that be all right with you, ma'am?" "If you'd like, Sergeant Major." Voss leaned back in his chair. He addressed the entire mess hall, now his voice carrying easily in the silence. "I met Major Rodriguez 5 years ago at a memorial service. Staff Sergeant Luis Mendoza, killed in a training accident at Camp Pendleton. Good Marine, better man." He paused. "At that service, I met 11 other Marines. They were there because 5 years earlier, Staff Sergeant Mendoza had led them on a reconnaissance patrol in the Euphrates River Valley." Mitchell's face had gone from pale to gray. Voss continued, his tone conversational, but his words precise. "That patrol was compromised. Ambushed. 12 Marines against 40-plus enemy fighters at night, in terrain that offered zero cover. They called for air support, but the closest strike package was 30 minutes out. They didn't have 30 minutes. They had maybe 5. He looked at Elena. Then someone answered their call. A single FA-18. Pilot said she was in the area. Said she could be on station in 90 seconds. The forward air controller on the ground, that was Mendoza, he briefed her on the situation. Friendlies in a depression. Enemy on 3 sides and closing. No way to mark the friendly position except with smoke. And he told her the enemy was so close that they were practically on top of them. 25 meters. Voss let that sink in. 25 meters is nothing. That's this table to the chow line. That's danger close. That's inside the minimum safe distance for any ordnance. That's so close that any weapon you drop has a good chance of killing your own people. He stood up. The pilot's response was, "Pop smoke, I'm coming in dry." Mitchell made a small sound, barely a whisper. "Dry means..." "No bombs," Kane said quietly. "Just the gun." Voss nodded. "Just the 20mm cannon, which requires getting low and slow and close, in the dark, with enemy shooting at you. And then putting rounds on target so precisely that you kill the enemy without touching the friendlies 25 meters away." He walked in a slow circle around Mitchell. That pilot made 4 passes in 90 seconds. Each pass walking cannon fire around those 12 Marines. The after-action report said she fired 267 rounds, killed or wounded 36 enemy fighters. Didn't put a single round inside the friendly perimeter. The silence in the mess hall was absolute. When it was over, Staff Sergeant Mendoza got on the radio and asked for her call sign, for the medal citation. She told him Black Mamba. He asked why. She said she didn't pick it. Someone else gave it to her on a different mission. But Mendoza said it fit. Said she flew with the devil's own luck and the precision of a snake. A Black Mamba. Voss stopped directly in front of Mitchell. Those 12 Marines went home, got to see their families, got to live their lives. Mendoza made it another 5 years before that training accident, but those were 5 years he wouldn't have had. None of them would have had those years. He leaned in close. And you laughed at her call sign. Mitchell's eyes were glassy. He was barely breathing. The doors opened again. This time, Brigadier General Thomas Matthews walked in. 1 star on his collar. Commander of the entire air station. The room snapped to attention. Elena started to stand, but the general waved her down. As you were. Except you, Corporal. You stay standing. Matthews walked to the table. He looked at Elena's meal. Thursday chicken. Yes, sir. My condolences. He turned to face Mitchell and the rest of the mess hall. I understand there's been some confusion about Major Rodriguez's qualifications. Let me clear that up for everyone. His voice carried command authority, the kind that came from 30 years of leading Marines into combat. Major Elena Rodriguez, call sign Black Mamba, currently serving as an instructor at VMFAT 1001, where she trains new FA-18 pilots. Prior to that assignment, she completed the Weapons and Tactics Instructor course with a grade of 96.4, the 3rd highest score in the course's history. He began ticking off items on his fingers. She has 847 combat flight hours across 3 deployments. She's flown 127 combat missions. She holds the Distinguished Flying Cross 2 Air Medals with Combat 5 and the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat 5. Matthews pulled out his phone and read from it. Her DFC citation reads, in part, for heroism and extraordinary achievement in aerial flight, while serving with Marine Strike Fighter Squadron 232 in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. On the night of 15th of March 2017, Major Rodriguez piloted her aircraft in response to an urgent close air support request from a Marine reconnaissance element under heavy enemy fire. He looked up. It goes on for another paragraph. But the key line is this. Major Rodriguez's actions directly resulted in the survival of 12 United States Marines and the elimination of a significant enemy force. Her flying demonstrated the highest traditions of Marine Corps aviation. Mitchell swayed slightly on his feet. Matthews wasn't done. 6 weeks after that mission, Major Rodriguez was flying over northern Syria when her aircraft was struck by a surface-to-air missile. The right engine exploded. Primary flight controls failed. Hydraulics were compromised. She was inverted and spinning toward the ground from 12,000 feet. He paused for effect. Standard procedure is to eject. Save yourself. The aircraft is insured. You are not. But Major Rodriguez was carrying classified targeting data from a joint special operations mission, data that could not fall into enemy hands. So instead of ejecting, she manually fought the aircraft back under control. She flew 80 miles back to base with 1 engine, minimal hydraulics, and more warning lights than working systems. Matthews looked directly at Mitchell. She landed that aircraft with 300 pounds of fuel remaining. That's enough for about 90 seconds of flight time. The damage assessment report said the aircraft shouldn't have been flyable at all. Said the only reason it made it back was pilot skill that exceeded any reasonable expectation. He put his phone away. The maintenance officer who inspected that bird afterward told me personally that he's never seen damage that severe on an aircraft that didn't crash. He said Major Rodriguez must have the steadiest hands in aviation. Matthews stepped closer to Mitchell. His voice dropped but somehow carried further. So when you see this officer sitting here in her flight jacket with her patches, you're not looking at someone playing dress-up. You're looking at someone who has done things you cannot imagine, who has saved lives you'll never know about, who has earned every single thread of that uniform in ways that would break most people. He turned to the entire mess hall. This kind of mistake ends now. On my base. You see an officer, you respect the rank. You see a warrior, you respect the warrior. You don't make assumptions based on what you think you see. You look at what's actually in front of you. He looked back at Mitchell. Am I clear, Corporal? Yes, sir. Mitchell whispered. I can't hear you. Yes, sir. The response cracked in the middle. Matthews nodded. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He looked at Elena. Major, you have every right to press charges under Article 134. Disrespect toward a superior commissioned officer. I will support any decision you make. Every eye in the room fixed on Elena. This was the moment. The hammer could fall. A young Marine's career could end right here, right now. Elena was quiet for a long moment. She looked at Mitchell's terrified face, at his friends who looked equally horrified, at the dozens of Marines watching this unfold. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly. "That won't be necessary, sir." The relief that washed over Mitchell was visible, but Elena wasn't done. "Corporal," she said, looking directly at him, "the standard is the standard. It protects all of us. It ensures that we judge people on their merit, on their actions, on their proven capabilities. You don't soften that standard for anyone." She stood up now, and there was steel in her voice. "But you also don't apply it differently, based on what you think you see. You don't look at someone and make assumptions about what they can or can't do, what they have or haven't earned. You look at the uniform, you read the rank, you see the patches that have been authorized and worn, and you respect the person in front of you." She picked up her CAC card from the table. "That's all there is to it. That's the standard. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Mitchell said. His voice was hollow. Elena nodded. "Good." She sat back down and picked up her fork, took another bite of the dry chicken. The message was clear. This conversation is over. General Matthews looked at Sergeant Major Voss. "Sergeant Major, I believe you have some counseling to conduct." "Yes, sir. And I want a full review of our procedures for challenging identification on this base. Seems like we need some remedial training on professional courtesy." "I'll have it on your desk by Monday, sir." Matthews nodded to Elena. "Major, finish your meal." Then he walked out. The mess hall remained silent for another 10 seconds. Then slowly conversations resumed. But they were different now, quieter, more thoughtful. Sergeant Major Voss pointed at Mitchell and his two friends. "You three, outside. Now." They filed out like men walking to their execution. Master Sergeant Kane lingered. He looked at Elena. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, that was more grace than he deserved." Elena shook her head. "He's 22, Master Sergeant. He made a mistake, a big one. But mistakes are how we learn." "Some mistakes cost more than others, ma'am." "True, but this one only cost his pride. He'll survive that." She met Kane's eyes. "And maybe he'll be better for it." Kane thought about that. Then he nodded. "Maybe so, ma'am." He walked away, leaving Elena alone again at her table. She took another bite of chicken. It really was dry. Her phone buzzed. A text from her squadron commanding officer. "Heard what happened. You okay?" She typed back. "Fine. Just another Thursday." But her hands were shaking slightly as she set the phone down. Not from anger, from the memories. The ones she kept carefully locked away most of the time. The ones that Mitchell's challenge had pried open. The desert at night. The desperate voices on the radio. The impossible mathematics of danger-close fire support. The weight of knowing that 12 lives depended on her being better than perfect. And later, 6 weeks later, the violent slam of the SAM impact. The sickening spin. The voice of her weapons systems officer screaming at her to eject, the decision to stay with the aircraft, the 80-mile fight home against physics and probability. She took a long drink of water. Someone approached her table, a young lance corporal female, maybe 20 years old. She held her tray uncertainly. "Ma'am, would it be okay if I sat here?" Elena looked up at her, saw the earnest expression, the hunger for connection with someone who'd done what she was trying to do. "Of course," Elena said. "Have a seat." The lance corporal sat down carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something. "I'm sorry about what that guy did," she said quietly. "It's okay." "It's not, though. It's really not." The young Marine looked down at her food. "I'm in the flight program. Just finished ground school, starting actual flight training next month." She hesitated. "There aren't a lot of women in the program." "No," Elena agreed. "There aren't. Does it ever get easier? People assuming you don't belong?" Elena considered the question, really considered it. "No." she said honestly. It doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. You prove yourself once, then twice, then 100 times. And eventually, most people stop questioning. Most, not all. What about the ones who don't stop? Elena smiled. It was a tired smile. You keep being excellent anyway. You keep meeting the standard, not for them, for you, for the Marines you'll fly with, for the people on the ground who'll need you when everything goes wrong. The Lance Corporal nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. They ate in silence for a moment. Then the younger woman spoke again. Can I ask, is that story true? The one the sergeant major told about the recon patrol? Elena set down her fork. She looked out the window at the flight line where FA-18 sat in neat rows. Yes, she said quietly. It's true. What was it like? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was distant. It was the most important 90 seconds of my life. Everything I'd ever learned, everything I'd ever trained for, all of it came down to those 4 passes. If I was too high, I'd miss. Too low, I'd hit them. Too fast, I couldn't adjust. Too slow, I'd get shot down. The margin for error was nothing, less than nothing. She looked back at the Lance Corporal, and all I could think about was those 12 voices on the radio, those 12 Marines who wanted to go home, who had families waiting, who deserved to survive because they'd done their job perfectly and got unlucky anyway. How did you do it? How did you stay calm? I didn't. Elena's voice was soft. I was terrified. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the stick. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it over the engine noise. She paused. But I did it anyway. Because that's the job. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be good enough that the fear doesn't matter. The Lance Corporal absorbed that. Thank you, ma'am, for telling me. And for showing that guy today that we belong here. You belong here, Elena corrected gently. You, specifically. Not because you're a woman, not despite being a woman, just because you're good enough. Remember that. Yes, ma'am. The young Marine finished her meal and left. Elena sat alone again, watching the flight line through the window. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. Stories already making the rounds. You're famous. Again. She didn't respond. She just wanted to finish her dry chicken and get back to work. But as she sat there, she thought about Mitchell. About the look on his face when reality crashed into his assumptions. About the fear and shame and recognition. She hoped he'd learn from it. Hoped he'd become better. Because the alternative, a Marine Corps where people made decisions based on assumptions, where they saw what they expected instead of what was real, that was dangerous. That got people killed. The mess hall was returning to normal now. Conversations flowing. Laughter starting up again. The incident fading into the background noise of daily life. But it would be remembered. Stories like this always were. They'd tell it in the barracks, in the ready rooms, at promotion ceremonies. A cautionary tale about assumptions and respect and what happens when you challenge someone without knowing what they've earned. Elena finished her meal, cleared her tray, walked toward the exit. As she passed through the door, she heard a fragment of conversation behind her. Can't believe he actually... Lucky she didn't press charges. Black Mamba, man, that's... She kept walking. Out into the California sunshine. Across the parking lot to her car. She had a brief to prep for the next day's training flight. Had evaluations to write. Had 100 small tasks that filled the spaces between the flying. This was her life now. Teaching others to survive. Passing on the lessons she'd learned in fire and darkness. Making sure the next generation was better prepared than she'd been. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what people imagined when they thought about fighter pilots. Most of it was paperwork and briefings and watching students make mistakes in controlled environments so they wouldn't make them in combat. But it mattered. It all mattered. And sometimes, like today, it meant standing up to ignorance, not with anger, not with revenge, but with quiet dignity and the unshakable knowledge that she'd earned every patch, every award, every single thread of respect. She got in her car and drove back to the squadron spaces. The dry chicken sat heavy in her stomach, but she'd survived worse. The door to Sergeant Major Voss's office slammed shut with a finality that made all three young Marines flinch. Mitchell stood at attention in the center of the room, flanked by Ortiz and Chen. His hands were shaking. He clasped them behind his back to hide it. Voss didn't sit down. He paced. Slow, deliberate. Each footstep a measured beat of judgment. "Do you know," Voss said, his voice dangerously quiet, "what the first rule of leadership is?" Mitchell's throat was dry. "Sergeant Major, I didn't ask you to speak. I asked you a question. The first rule of leadership. What is it? Know your Marines, Sergeant Major." "Wrong." Voss stopped pacing. "The first rule is knowing what you don't know. Understanding the limits of your knowledge. Having the humility to recognize when you're about to step into something beyond your comprehension." He leaned against his desk. "You failed that test today, Corporal. Spectacularly." Mitchell's face burned. "Sergeant Major, I thought she was—" "You thought." Voss's voice cut like wire. "Based on what? Based on seeing a woman in a flight jacket and assuming she didn't belong. Based on your vast experience of 18 months in the Corps. No, Sergeant Major, You humiliated yourself. You humiliated your fellow Marines. You disrespected a field-grade officer who has more combat experience than everyone in that mess hall combined." Voss pushed off the desk. "And worst of all, you did it publicly. You made it a show. For what? To impress your friends." Ortiz shifted slightly. Voss's eyes snapped to him. "You think this doesn't include you, Lance Corporal? You sat there and watched. You laughed. That makes you complicit." "Sergeant Major, I didn't know." "That's the problem. None of you knew. And instead of being cautious, instead of showing basic military courtesy, you decided to assume, to judge, to challenge someone based on nothing but your own ignorance." Chen, the youngest, was visibly shaking now. Voss's expression softened fractionally when he looked at him. "Private First Class Chen, you tried to stop this. I heard you tell them to just eat their food. Why didn't you try harder?" Chen's voice came out small. I didn't want them to think I was scared or—" "Scared of what? Of being respectful, of showing basic human decency." Voss shook his head. "That's peer pressure, Marine. And it's how good people make bad decisions. Remember that." He turned back to Mitchell. "Here's what's going to happen. All three of you are going to draft written apologies to Major Rodriguez. Not 2 sentences. Not some half-hearted sorry if I offended you garbage. Real apologies. Taking full responsibility for your actions. I want them on my desk by 0800 tomorrow." "Yes, Sergeant Major," they said in unison. "Second, you're all going to attend every equal opportunity training session on this base for the next 6 months. Every single one. I don't care if you've already been to it. You're going again." Mitchell's stomach sank. Those sessions were monthly. That was 6 months of his free time gone. "Third, Corporal Mitchell, you're going to research Major Rodriguez's service record. Not the classified parts, just what's public. Her award citations, her deployment history. And you're going to prepare a presentation on it for your entire platoon. You're going to stand up in front of everyone and explain exactly who you challenged today. The humiliation would be total. Everyone in his platoon would know. Everyone in his company. The story would spread." "Sergeant Major," Mitchell said, his voice cracking. "Request permission to speak." "Denied. I'm not done." Voss moved closer. "Fourth, your promotion recommendation that was submitted last week withdrawn. You're not ready for sergeant. Maybe you'll never be ready. We'll see." The words hit Mitchell like a physical blow. He'd been working toward that promotion for months. It was supposed to happen next quarter. His family was expecting it. He'd told his father, a retired Marine, that he was getting pinned. "You will remain Corporal Mitchell until you demonstrate that you understand what it means to lead Marines, until you prove you can see people for who they are, not what you assume them to be. That might take 6 months, might take 2 years, might never happen." Voss stepped back. "But here's the part that should scare you more than anything else. Major Rodriguez had the authority and the justification to press charges. Article 134, disrespect toward a superior commissioned officer. That's court-martial territory. That's the end of your career, a federal conviction, and a dishonorable discharge that follows you forever. He let that sink in. She chose not to. She showed you mercy you didn't earn and didn't deserve. She gave you a second chance that most officers wouldn't give. Do you understand what that means? Yes, Sergeant Major. I don't think you do. It means she's a better leader than you'll probably ever be. It means she looked at you, a young, stupid, ignorant corporal who just publicly humiliated her, and she still saw someone worth saving, someone who could learn, someone who could become better. Voss's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Don't you dare waste that gift. The silence in the office was crushing. Now get out, all three of you. And if I hear about any of you making any comment, any joke, any sideways remark about this incident or about Major Rodriguez, I will personally ensure your next duty station is somewhere that makes you wish you'd never heard the words United States Marine Corps. Clear? Yes, Sergeant Major. They filed out. The door closed behind them. In the hallway, Mitchell leaned against the wall, his legs weak. Dude, Ortiz breathed. That was... don't. Mitchell's voice was hollow. Just... don't. They walked in silence back toward their barracks. Other Marines passed them in the corridors. Mitchell felt like they were all staring. Like everyone already knew. They probably did. Stories like this moved fast. Chen broke the silence. What are you going to write in the apology? Mitchell didn't answer. He didn't know. How do you apologize for something like this? What words could possibly convey the shame, the regret, the recognition that you'd revealed something ugly about yourself to the entire world? Back at the squadron spaces, Elena sat at her desk in the instructor's office. The room was shared by 6 WTIs, but she was alone right now. The others were either flying or in the simulator building. She tried to focus on the training syllabus in front of her. Tomorrow's flight was a complex air-to-ground scenario. 4 students, 2 targets, coordinated strikes with deconfliction requirements. She needed to write the brief plan, the range time coordinate with the tower, but her hands kept drifting to her keyboard, pulling up old files. Files she tried not to look at too often. After Action Report, 15 March 2017. Operation Inherent Resolve. She read the clinical language, the dry recitation of facts, grid coordinates and weapons expenditure and tactical outcomes. It was all there. Everything that happened that night. Everything except what it felt like. She closed the file, opened another one. Distinguished Flying Cross citation, her name at the top. The words heroism and extraordinary achievement jumping out. She'd read it a dozen times when it was first awarded. Then she'd put it away and tried not to think about it. Because reading about heroism felt like a lie when she remembered the terror, the absolute certainty for those 90 seconds that she was about to kill the people she was trying to save. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, her former squadron commander, now stationed at Quantico. Elena answered. Ma'am? Cut that out. You know I hate formality when we're not in uniform. Chen's voice was warm but concerned. I heard about what happened today. News travels fast. It always does, especially when it involves Black Mamba putting a boot in his place without raising her voice. A pause. You okay? Elena leaned back in her chair. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I asked if you're okay. The distinction mattered. Elena closed her eyes. It brought some things back, things I don't usually think about. The Euphrates mission, and others. Chen was quiet for a moment. You know you don't owe anyone your trauma, right? That kid challenged you, and you handled it with more grace than most would. But you don't have to be the teaching moment for every ignorant Marine who makes assumptions. Then who does it? Who shows them that their assumptions are wrong? Elena. No, I mean it. If we don't stand up to it, if we don't prove we belong every single time someone questions us, then it never stops. It never gets better for the next woman, or the one after her. You sound tired. I am tired. The admission came out before Elena could stop it. I'm tired of proving myself. I'm tired of every room being a test, every conversation being a potential challenge. I'm tired of earning the same respect 20 times that a male pilot earns once. I know. And the worst part, the absolute worst part. Elena's voice cracked slightly. He looked at my patches, at my rank, at everything that's supposed to command respect, and all he saw was someone who didn't belong. Because I'm a woman. That's it. That's the only data point that mattered to him. Chen let her talk. I've flown combat missions in 3 countries. I've put more ordnance on target than most pilots see in a career. I've saved lives. I've been shot at and shot down, and I've clawed my way back from situations that should have killed me. Her voice was harder now. And none of that mattered. None of it. Because he looked at me and decided I was less, without knowing a single thing about me. But you proved him wrong. Did I? Or did I just prove to him that I'm the exception, that I'm not like other women? Elena shook her head even though Chen couldn't see it. How many times do we have to be exceptional before we're just allowed to be competent? The question hung there. Chen sighed. I don't have a good answer for that. I wish I did. I've been dealing with the same thing for 20 years and it hasn't gotten much better. Different faces, same assumptions. So what do we do? What you did today. We keep showing up. Keep being excellent. Keep proving them wrong, one ignorant comment at a time. And we hope that eventually enough people see the truth, that the assumptions start to die. Chen paused. It's not fair. It's exhausting. But it's what we've got. Elena was quiet. You still there? Chen asked. Yeah, just thinking. About that Lance Corporal who sat with me after. She's in the flight program, just finished ground school. She asked me if it ever gets easier. What did you tell her? The truth. That it doesn't, but that she gets stronger. Good answer. I hope so, because I looked at her face, and I saw myself 10 years ago. That same hunger to belong. That same determination to prove everyone wrong, and I wanted to tell her to run. To pick a different path. To save herself the pain. Elena's voice softened. But I didn't. Because we need her. We need every woman who's willing to fight through the doubt and the assumptions and the constant need to prove ourselves. Because otherwise, nothing changes. You're a better person than me, Chen said. I'm not sure I wouldn't have pressed charges against that corporal. I thought about it for about 10 seconds. Then I looked at him and I saw a kid, a stupid, ignorant kid who made a terrible mistake. And I thought about all the mistakes I made when I was his age. Different mistakes, but mistakes. Your mistakes didn't involve publicly humiliating a superior officer. No, but they could have. If the circumstances had been different, if I'd had a little more confidence and a little less sense. Elena rubbed her eyes. He'll learn from this, or he won't. Either way, destroying his career wouldn't have made anything better. You're probably right. Doesn't mean he didn't deserve it. They talked for a few more minutes. Small talk about mutual friends, news from Quantico, a funny story about a colonel who'd accidentally locked himself in a simulator booth. Normal things. The kind of conversation that reminded Elena why she'd stayed in the Corps despite everything. After they hung up, Elena sat in the silence of her office. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the flight line, jets taxiing, the whine of auxiliary power units, the organized chaos of a squadron at work. She pulled up a blank document and started writing tomorrow's brief. The work helped. It always did. When her mind was occupied with tactical problems and training objectives, there was less room for the memories, but they crept in anyway. They always did. The feeling of the stick shaking in her hands during that danger-close gun run. The sound of Staff Sergeant Mendoza's voice tight with fear giving her coordinates. The impossible mathematics of speed and altitude and bullet trajectory. The knowledge that if she was wrong by even a few feet, she'd kill the people she was trying to save. And later, 6 weeks later, the slam of the SAM impact, the violent spin, the fire in her right engine painting her mirrors orange, her WSO screaming at her to eject, the decision to stay, the 80-mile flight on one engine and manual reversion every second expecting the aircraft to come apart around her. She'd written the reports, been debriefed by intelligence, received the medals, done all the official things that turned combat into paperwork. But nobody asked about the nightmares. Nobody wanted to hear about the nights she woke up in a cold sweat feeling the spin, hearing the warnings. Nobody cared that she sometimes couldn't eat before a flight because her stomach was too tight with remembered fear. Because she was Black Mamba. She was the legend. The story they told to motivate people. You couldn't be a legend and also be human. You couldn't be a hero and also be scared. So she kept it locked away, filed it under handled, and moved forward. Because that's what you did. That's what the job required. Her office phone rang. She answered without looking. Major Rodriguez. Elena, it's Mike. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Davidson, her current squadron commander. Got a minute? Yes, sir. Come down to my office when you get a chance. No rush. Just want to chat. That was never good. On my way, sir. She walked down the hallway. Davidson's office was at the end, larger than the shared instructor space, but not by much. The door was open. He waved her in. Close it, please. Elena did. Sat down in the chair across from his desk. Davidson was 45, a career Hornet pilot with a calm demeanor that made him popular with his Marines. He looked tired right now. Hell of a day, he said. Yes, sir. I heard what happened. About 6 different versions of it, actually. But I'm guessing the truth is somewhere in the middle. Elena gave him the condensed version. The challenge, the escalation, the intervention, the aftermath. Davidson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. How are you holding up? I'm fine, sir. Elena, off the record. How are you actually holding up? She met his eyes. Davidson was one of the good ones. He'd flown combat missions himself. He understood. It was harder than I thought it would be, she admitted. Not the confrontation. I've dealt with that before. But the memories it brought up, the way touching those patches made me remember everything associated with them. The Euphrates mission. And the SAM hit. And a dozen other missions that I usually don't think about. Davidson nodded slowly. You know, the chaplain's office has a counselor who specializes in combat stress, right? Not a formal thing, just someone to talk to. I know, sir. I'm okay. You sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you just had to defend your right to wear your own uniform. Had to justify your own existence as a Marine officer. That's not nothing. Elena was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something, sir? Of course. Has anyone ever asked you to prove you're authorized to wear your flight jacket? Davidson's expression changed. Understanding dawned. No, never. Has anyone ever looked at your patches and assumed you were wearing your wife's gear? No. Assumed you were a civilian playing dress-up? No. Then you can't understand what today was like. With all due respect, sir. Elena's voice was level but firm. You've never had to prove you belong. You just do. Because you're a man and men are expected to be pilots, to be officers, to be warriors. Davidson absorbed that. You're right, he said finally. I can't understand, but I can listen, and I can make sure it doesn't happen again in my squadron. It'll happen again, sir. Maybe not here, maybe not this month, but it'll happen. Then we'll deal with it when it does. He leaned forward. Look, I called you in here because I want to make sure you know something. That corporal. He doesn't speak for this squadron. He doesn't speak for this corps. Most of us, the vast majority, we see you for exactly what you are. One of the finest pilots I've ever had the privilege of serving with. The words hit harder than Elena expected. Her throat tightened. Thank you, sir. I mean it. The training reports from your students are exceptional. Your flight evaluations are top tier. Your leadership skills are exactly what we need in instructors. He paused. You're making the next generation of Hornet pilots better. That matters more than any ignorant corporal's opinion. Elena nodded. She didn't trust her voice right now. Take the rest of the day, Davidson said. Get some air. Clear your head. Tomorrow's brief can wait until morning. Sir, I'm fine to... That wasn't a suggestion, Major. That was an order from your commanding officer. Go home. Decompress. Come back tomorrow ready to teach. Yes, sir. She stood, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. Sir, can I ask one more thing? Shoot. Do you think he'll learn from this? The corporal? Davidson considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. Some people learn from their mistakes. Some people just get better at hiding their ignorance, but you gave him the chance to be the first kind. That's all you can do." Elena nodded and left. The sun was lower now as she walked to her car. The afternoon was bleeding into evening. The flight line was quieter. Most of the day's training missions were complete. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. Steady now, not shaking like they had been in the mess hall when the memories hit. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Major Rodriguez. This is Captain Lisa Torres from VMFA 314. I heard what happened today. Just wanted to say thank you for handling it the way you did, for showing that grace under pressure isn't just something we do in the cockpit. You're an inspiration." Elena stared at the message. Then another one came in. Different number. "Ma'am Gunny Patterson from Mag 11. That corporal had no idea who he was dealing with. Proud to serve in the same corps as you." Then another. "Major, this is Captain Jim Walsh. I was one of the 12. Reaper 2. Staff Sergeant Mendoza's team. I was the saw gunner that night in the Euphrates Valley. I never got to thank you properly. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. What you did today, showing mercy to that kid, that's the same kind of person who risked everything for us. Thank you. For everything." Elena read that last message 3 times. Her eyes stung. She'd been 28 that night, flying her first combat deployment, still trying to prove herself, still fighting against the doubts her own and everyone else's. She remembered Mendoza's voice on the radio, the controlled panic underneath his professional tone. She remembered making the decision to go in dry to use just the gun, remembered her wingman telling her she was insane, and she remembered the silence after her 4th pass, the terrible, wonderful silence when the enemy fire stopped. When Mendoza came back on the radio, his voice shaking with disbelief and relief, and something close to worship. "Black Mamba Reaper 2. All 12 souls accounted for. 0 casualties. I don't know what you just did, but we owe you everything." Everything. She'd flown home that night with her hands still shaking, had landed on the carrier and climbed out of her cockpit and vomited over the side of the deck from the adrenaline crash. Her plane captain had looked at her with wide eyes. "Ma'am, you okay?" "Fine. Just fine." But she hadn't been fine. Not really. Not for weeks afterward. Because she'd been that close inches maybe from killing friendly troops, from turning a rescue into a massacre. The margin for error had been nothing, less than nothing. And yet, she'd pulled it off, had threaded that impossible needle, had brought 12 Marines home. She started the car and drove off base. Her apartment was 10 minutes away in a quiet complex that catered mostly to junior officers, small, practical, nothing fancy. She dropped her keys on the counter and stood in the middle of her living room, suddenly exhausted, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Her eye fell on a framed photo on the bookshelf. 12 men in desert camouflage smiling at the camera. In the center, Staff Sergeant Luis Mendoza. He'd sent her that photo 3 years after the mission, after he'd rotated back to the States. "Just wanted you to remember the faces you saved," his note had said. "We're all doing good, living our lives, because of you." Mendoza was dead now. Training accident 2 years ago. The funeral had been the hardest thing Elena had ever attended, harder than combat, because he'd survived the war only to die in a stupid helicopter crash during a routine exercise. His widow had hugged Elena at the funeral. "He always said you were the reason he got to see our daughter born, the reason he got to walk her to kindergarten, the reason we had any of it at all." Elena had cried then, really cried, for Mendoza, for his family, for the fundamental injustice of surviving combat, only to die in peace, but also for herself, for the burden of being someone's savior, for knowing that her actions had bought Mendoza 5 more years, and those years had mattered, but they hadn't been enough. Nothing was ever enough. She turned away from the photo, made herself a simple dinner. Pasta with marinara sauce. The routine helped. The familiar motions, boil water, cook pasta, heat sauce, eat. She was halfway through the meal when her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. Her father. She answered. Hi, Dad. Mija. His voice was gruff but warm. I heard you had some excitement today. Dad, how did you? I still know people on base. Word travels. A pause. You okay? I'm fine. That's not what I heard. I heard some boot got in your face in the mess hall. Made some comments. Elena sighed. It's handled. Did you handle it right? What do you mean? Her father's voice sharpened. I mean, did you put him in his place? Did you show him what happens when you disrespect a superior officer? I showed him grace, Dad. I gave him a chance to learn. Silence. Then, Grace. You showed him grace. Yes. Mija, that boy disrespected you, publicly. You had every right to. I know what my rights were. I chose differently. Why? Elena set down her fork. Because destroying his career wouldn't have made anything better. It wouldn't have educated anyone. It wouldn't have changed minds. It would have just made me feel powerful for 5 minutes and then made me feel empty. Her father was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You're a better person than I am. I learned from you, Dad. You taught me that strength isn't just about hitting back. It's about knowing when not to. I taught you to defend yourself, to never let anyone make you feel less than. And I didn't. I defended myself by being exactly who I am, by letting my record speak, by showing that their assumptions were wrong. Elena's voice was firm. That's more powerful than any punishment I could have requested. Her father laughed, a short, rough sound. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They talked for a few more minutes. Her father caught her up on family news. Her younger brother was getting married. Her mother wanted to know when Elena would visit. Soon, Elena promised. After this training cycle ends. After they hung up, she finished her dinner, washed the dishes, stood at her kitchen window watching the last light fade from the sky. Somewhere on base, Corporal Mitchell was probably sitting in his barracks room, writing an apology he didn't know how to word. Somewhere, Master Sergeant Kane was telling the story to other senior enlisted, shaking his head at the stupidity of young Marines. Somewhere, that Lance Corporal from the flight program was studying her manuals, dreaming of the day she'd wear her own patches. And here in this quiet apartment, Elena stood alone with her memories and her choices, and the weight of being someone other people looked up to. It was a heavy weight, but someone had to carry it. She turned away from the window and started preparing for bed. Tomorrow would come early. There would be students to teach, flights to evaluate, 100 small moments where she'd have to be perfect because anything less would be used as evidence that she didn't belong. But tonight she let herself be tired. Let herself feel the exhaustion of constantly proving herself. Let herself acknowledge that grace was hard and mercy was costly, and being the better person was sometimes the loneliest choice. Tomorrow, she'd be Black Mamba again, the legend, the instructor, the officer who had it all together. But tonight, she was just Elena. Tired, human, and wondering how much longer she could keep carrying everyone else's expectations along with her own. Morning came too early. Elena's alarm went off at 0500, the same as always. She silenced it and lay in the dark for a moment, gathering herself. Her body felt heavy, not physical exhaustion, something deeper. She forced herself up. Shower, coffee, uniform. The routine carried her through the motions when motivation failed. By 0630, she was back on base, walking toward the squadron spaces. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the flight line in orange and gold. Beautiful. She'd stopped noticing it years ago. The ready room was already occupied when she entered. 3 other instructors sat around the table with coffee and flight bags. The conversation stopped when she walked in. Captain Brad Morrison looked up first. Morning, Black Mamba. The other 2, Captain Lisa Chen and Major Tom Williams, both nodded. Their faces carried that careful neutrality people use when they don't know what to say. Elena poured herself coffee. Morning. Hell of a thing yesterday, Morrison said. Morrison. He was 32, a solid pilot, generally decent but sometimes tone-deaf. Heard that corporal got the book thrown at him. Not exactly, Elena said. Really, I heard Voss made him cry. Brad. Lisa Chen cut in, her voice sharp. Maybe we don't gossip about it. Morrison held up his hands. Not gossip, just saying Guy had it coming. Elena sat down. Can we talk about today's schedule instead? Sure. Morrison shuffled his papers. We've got 4 students on the morning brief. Air-to-ground scenario. Target coordinates are already loaded. They ran through the training plan. Target identification, weapons selection, deconfliction procedures, the familiar language of combat training. By 0700, Elena felt more centered. This was her world, her expertise. Here she knew exactly who she was and what she was supposed to do. The students started arriving at 0715. 4 young pilots, all male, all fresh from basic flight training. They filed in quietly, nervous energy radiating off them. One of them, Lieutenant Jake Patterson, did a double take when he saw Elena. His eyes went to her patches, then to her rank, then quickly away. Elena noticed. She always noticed. The brief took 45 minutes. Elena walked them through every phase of the mission. Ingress route, target identification, attack geometry, egress procedures. She asked questions, probed their understanding, corrected their misconceptions. Patterson kept stealing glances at her. Finally, during a break in the presentation, he raised his hand. Ma'am, can I ask a question? That's why we're here, Lieutenant. Is it true you're the Black Mamba, the one from the Euphrates Valley? The room went silent. The other 3 students suddenly found their notepads fascinating. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Lisa Chen's jaw tightened. Elena looked at Patterson. Young, maybe 24, earnest face. He wasn't being disrespectful, just curious. But the question still felt like a wound reopening. Yes, she said simply. I heard about that mission at the basic school. Our instructors used it as an example of perfect close air support execution. Patterson's enthusiasm was genuine. They said it was the most precise, danger-close gun run in modern combat aviation. They exaggerated. Did they? Patterson leaned forward. Because the after-action report said you fired 267 rounds and didn't put a single one inside the friendly perimeter. At night, at 450 knots, 25 meters from friendlies. Elena felt the other instructors watching her, waiting to see how she'd handle this. Lieutenant Patterson, that mission was 7 years ago. Today we're focused on your training, on making you good enough that if you ever face a similar situation, you'll have the skills to handle it. It was a deflection. Patterson recognized it but had the good sense not to push. Yes, ma'am, the brief continued. By 0830 they were heading to the flight line. Elena did her walk-around on her assigned Hornet, checking every panel and seal. Muscle memory. Her hands knew what to look for without conscious thought. She climbed into the cockpit. Strapped in, ran through her pre-flight checks. The familiar smells, JP5 fuel hydraulic fluid, the particular scent of the oxygen system. The familiar sounds, the whine of the APU, the click of switches, the crackle of the radio. This was home. Had been for 15 years. More home than any apartment or base housing. In this cockpit, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. No questions, no doubts, no need to prove anything. Viper 1 Tower, you're cleared to taxi. Elena's hands moved across the controls. The Hornet rolled forward. Behind her, the 4 students followed in their own aircraft. She'd watched them from above during the exercise, evaluating their performance, ready to intervene if they made dangerous mistakes. The flight went smoothly. Patterson showed promise, good instincts, smooth hands on the controls. He made his target run with textbook precision, rolled out on time, executed his egress without drama. After they landed and debriefed, he approached her again. Ma'am, can I ask you something else? Elena braced herself. Go ahead. How do you handle it? The pressure of being... He struggled for words. Of being the example everyone points to. Of having people expect perfection because of your reputation. The question surprised her. It was more insightful than she expected from someone his age. You don't handle it, she said honestly. You just do your job, every day, as well as you can. Sometimes you're good enough, sometimes you're not. But you keep showing up anyway. Patterson nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am, for being honest. After he left, Lisa Chen appeared at Elena's elbow. You okay? Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because yesterday happened. Because you're clearly dealing with something. Because we care about you. Elena turned to face her. Lisa was 35, one of only 3 female Hornet pilots currently at Miramar. They'd flown together in Afghanistan 4 years ago. I'm fine, Lisa. You're a terrible liar. Lisa gestured toward the parking lot. Come on, we're getting lunch off base. My treat. I have paperwork to... Can wait. Let's go. They ended up at a small Mexican place 2 miles from the gate. Cheap, authentic, popular with junior enlisted because it didn't price gouge. They found a booth in the back. After they ordered, Lisa got straight to the point. Talk to me. Really talk. No, I'm fine garbage. Elena stared at her water glass. What do you want me to say? I want you to say how you actually feel. About yesterday. About that corporal. About having to defend your right to exist in your own uniform. It doesn't matter how I feel. Of course it matters. Elena, you're one of the strongest people I know. But even strong people have limits. Even strong people break if they carry too much for too long. The server brought their food. Elena picked at her enchiladas without appetite. I'm tired, she said finally. I'm so tired of fighting the same fight over and over. Every room, every new assignment. Every time someone new sees me for the first time, I have to prove myself all over again. I know. Do you? Because I've been doing this for 15 years, Lisa. 15 years of being the first, the only, the exception. Of being Black Mamba instead of just Elena. Of having my worst day turned into a legend that I have to live up to every single day after. Lisa was quiet, letting her talk. That night in the Euphrates Valley, I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. I made that gun run because I didn't have a choice. Those Marines were going to die if I didn't try. So I tried. And I got lucky. Impossibly, improbably lucky. Elena's voice dropped, but everyone talks about it like it was skill. Like I'm some kind of supernatural pilot who can do things normal humans can't. And maybe that was useful at first. Maybe it opened doors. But now it's a cage. Because I can't be human anymore. I can't have a bad day. Can't make a mistake. Can't show weakness. Because I'm not Elena Rodriguez, Marine officer. I'm Black Mamba, the legend. You're both, Lisa said gently. You can be both. Can I? Because yesterday when that corporal challenged me, I couldn't just be angry. Couldn't just be hurt. I had to be gracious. Had to be the bigger person. Had to think about what my response would teach everyone watching. I couldn't just be a person having a human reaction to being disrespected. She finally met Lisa's eyes. I'm so tired of being a symbol. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I don't have answers for you. I wish I did, but I can tell you that you don't have to carry this alone. You have people who see you, really see you, not the legend, you. Elena's throat tightened. Thank you. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Lisa said, Did you hear what happened this morning? What? That Lance Corporal. The young woman who sat with you yesterday. She came to my office. Asked if I'd be her mentor. Said you inspired her to push through the doubt and commit to the program fully. Elena absorbed that. I didn't do anything. You showed her what's possible. That's everything. Lisa smiled. You might be tired of being a symbol, but symbols matter. They change what people think is achievable. That's a lot of pressure. It is. And it's not fair. But it's real. Lisa finished her burrito. Look, I'm not saying you have to be perfect. I'm not saying you can't have bad days. But I am saying that what you do matters. How you handle these situations matters. Because there's a generation of young women watching you, learning from you, being shaped by your example. Elena thought about the Lance Corporal, about Patterson's questions, about all the messages she'd received yesterday from Marines she'd never met, but who knew her story. It's too much, she said quietly. Yeah, It probably is. But you're not doing it alone. You've got me. You've got Davidson. You've got a whole network of people who've got your back. That helps? Good. Lisa signaled for the check. Now let's get back before someone notices we're both gone and starts rumors. They drove back to base in Lisa's car. As they passed through the gate, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Major Rodriguez. This is Corporal Mitchell. I wanted you to know I finished writing my apology. Sergeant Major Voss approved it. I'll deliver it to your office this afternoon if that's acceptable. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I hope you'll read it. Elena stared at the message. Part of her wanted to tell him not to bother, that no apology could undo the humiliation, the assumption, the disrespect. But another part, the part that had chosen Grace yesterday, wanted to give him the chance to grow. She typed back, acceptable, 1400 hours. When they got back to the squadron, there was a notice on the bulletin board. New mandatory training, professional conduct, and equal opportunity in the workplace. All personnel required to attend. Monthly sessions starting next week. Morrison groaned when he saw it. Great. More death by PowerPoint. Needed apparently, Lisa said pointedly. Because of one corporal's stupidity, we all have to sit through hours of training we've already done. Because clearly the training didn't stick the first time, Elena said. Her voice was sharp. And maybe if we'd done a better job creating a culture where that kind of behavior was unthinkable yesterday, wouldn't have happened. Shut. Morrison had the grace to look ashamed. You're right, sorry. At 1400 hours exactly, there was a knock on Elena's office door. She looked up from her computer. Come in. Corporal Mitchell entered. He was in his service uniform, perfectly pressed. His face was pale. He held a manila envelope in his hands. Ma'am, Corporal Mitchell reporting as requested. At ease, Corporal. Sit down. He sat in the chair across from her desk, spine rigid, eyes fixed on a point above her head. The envelope sat on his lap. Elena waited. Let the silence stretch. Finally, she said, You wanted to deliver an apology. Yes, ma'am. He held out the envelope with both hands. I wrote everything I wanted to say. Sergeant Major Voss approved it, but I also wanted to apologize in person, if that's acceptable. Go ahead. Mitchell swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly. Ma'am, what I did yesterday was inexcusable. I made assumptions based on prejudice and ignorance. I publicly disrespected a superior officer. I challenged your authority and your right to wear your uniform based on nothing but my own stupidity. He paused, clearly struggling with emotion. I've spent the last 24 hours reading about your service record, about the missions you've flown, about the lives you've saved. And I realized that while I was making jokes in the mess hall, you were risking your life for Marines like me. Marines who didn't deserve your sacrifice. His voice cracked. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to forget what I did. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, who I disrespected. And I swear to you, ma'am, I will spend the rest of my career trying to be better than the Marine I was yesterday. Elena took the envelope. Thank you for your apology, Corporal. Ma'am, may I ask a question? Yes. Why didn't you press charges? Why did you show me mercy? I didn't earn. Elena considered her answer carefully. Because I believe people can change. I believe mistakes can be teaching moments if we let them. And I believe the Marine Corps needs people who are willing to learn and grow, not people who are destroyed the first time they mess up. Mitchell's eyes were glassy. I don't deserve that, ma'am. Maybe not, but you got it anyway. Don't waste it. I won't. I promise you I won't. Good. Then we're done here. Dismissed, Corporal. Mitchell stood, came to attention, saluted sharply. Elena returned it. He left without another word. After he was gone, Elena opened the envelope. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. She started reading. The apology was thorough, detailed. He broke down every assumption he'd made, every mistaken judgment, every moment where he'd chosen his ego over respect. He analyzed his own thinking, identified the biases that had led him astray. articulated specific steps he would take to ensure it never happened again. It was Elena had to admit a good apology, the kind that showed genuine understanding rather than just regret at being caught. She filed it away and tried to return to work, but her concentration was shot. She kept thinking about Mitchell's face, about the genuine shame and remorse, about whether he really would change or whether he'd just learned to hide his assumptions better. Her phone rang. Davidson's extension. "Elena, can you come down here? We have a situation." She found Davidson in his office with Master Sergeant Kane and another Marine she didn't recognize, a woman in her mid-30s wearing the uniform of a GS-12 civilian employee. "Major Rodriguez, this is Dr. Sarah Lynn from the Base Equal Opportunity Office. She wanted to talk to you about yesterday's incident." Elena's guard went up immediately. "Ma'am, Dr." Lynn smiled warmly. "Please sit. This isn't an investigation. I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're processing everything." "I'm fine." "I've heard that answer a lot in the last 24 hours. From you and from others." Dr. Lynn pulled out a tablet. "The thing is, major incidents like yesterday don't happen in a vacuum. They're symptoms of larger cultural issues. And the Equal Opportunity Office is tasked with identifying and addressing those issues. I didn't file a complaint. I know, but the base commander has made it clear that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, and he's asked my office to conduct a climate assessment." She looked at Elena directly. "I'd like to start with you, if you're willing." Elena glanced at Davidson. He nodded slightly. "What do you want to know?" Elena asked. "Have you experienced other incidents like this? Maybe not as public, but similar assumptions or challenges." Elena laughed. It came out bitter. "How much time do you have?" Dr. Lynn's expression softened. "As much as you need." So Elena told her about the flight instructor at Pensacola who'd told her women didn't have the upper body strength for carrier landings, about the senior officer who'd suggested she'd gotten her slot in the fighter pipeline because of quotas, not merit, about the maintenance chief who'd initially refused to take her discrepancy reports seriously because lady pilots are always complaining about every little thing, about 100 small cuts, 1,000 tiny moments where she'd had to prove herself again, where her competence was questioned, where her presence was treated as unusual, unexpected, unwelcome. "And yesterday was just the most visible example," Elena finished. "But it happens all the time, just usually more quietly." Dr. Lynn took notes. "How do other female Marines in your squadron experience the culture? Ask them. Don't ask me to speak for them." "Fair point." Dr. Lynn looked up. "Dr. Lynn, what would you want to change if you could change anything about the culture here?" Elena thought about that. "I'd want people to see the uniform before they see the gender, to look at the rank, the patches, the demonstrated competence, and judge based on that, not on assumptions about what women can or can't do." "That's reasonable." "It shouldn't be revolutionary," Elena said. "It should be the baseline, but here we are." The meeting lasted another 30 minutes. Dr. Lynn asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, took extensive notes. When it was over, she thanked Elena for her time and candor. "This helps tremendously. We're going to implement some changes based on what we're learning. It won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start." After she left, Davidson looked at Elena. "You okay? You know I'm getting really tired of that question." "I'll take that as a yes." He smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you handled all of this remarkably well. Better than most would." "I didn't have much choice." "You always have a choice. You chose grace. You chose to be a teacher instead of a punisher. That takes strength most people don't have." Elena stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think anything will really change, or are we just going through the motions?" Davidson was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. Culture change is hard. It takes time. It takes consistent effort from leadership at every level. But I think yesterday might have been a catalyst. People saw what happened. They saw your response. They saw the consequences for Mitchell. That matters." "I hope you're right." That evening, Elena returned to her apartment exhausted. She microwaved a frozen dinner and ate it standing at her kitchen counter. She should call her mother, should respond to the dozen messages from friends checking on her, should do 100 things that responsible adults do. Instead, she pulled out her old flight logbook, the physical one she'd kept during her first deployment, before everything was digital, when recording flight hours meant writing them by hand in careful columns. She flipped through the pages, each entry a memory, each flight a story. She found the entry for March 15th, 2017, the Euphrates Valley mission. Her handwriting was shaky. She'd filled it out after the debriefing, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. Mission type close air support. Ordnance expended 267 RDs, 20 millibom. Enemy KIA 36. Friendly casualties. Row. Comments. Danger close gun run. Successful extraction. That was it. 3 lines to summarize the most intense 90 seconds of her life. The mission that had earned her the Distinguished Flying Cross and the call sign that would define her career. She closed the logbook, put it back on the shelf, tried not to think about how much simpler life had been then, how clear the mission was. Enemy there, friendlies here, put rounds on target, bring everyone home. Now everything was complicated. Now she was fighting battles that didn't have clear enemies or clean victories, fighting against assumptions and biases and cultural inertia. Her phone buzzed, a text from Lisa Chen. Group of us grabbing drinks at Murphy's Law. You should come. No talk about yesterday, just friends hanging out. Elena almost declined, almost sent some excuse about being tired or having work to do. But then she thought about what Lisa had said earlier, about not carrying everything alone, about having people who saw her. She texted back, "Be there in 20 minutes." Murphy's Law was a dive bar 3 miles off base. Dim lighting, sticky floors, cheap beer. It was where Marines went when they wanted to be off duty. Really off duty. No talk of work, no rank structure, just people. She found Lisa at a table in the back with 4 others. Morrison was there, along with 2 pilots from different squadrons and a young captain Elena recognized from base ops. They made room for her, bought her a beer, talked about everything except work, sports, movies, the ridiculous parking situation at the commissary, normal things, human things. Morrison, who'd been awkward that morning, apologized again. "I was an ass earlier, about the training. I wasn't thinking." "It's fine, Brad." "It's not. Lisa called me out on it after you left. She was right. I was being dismissive of something serious." He took a drink of his beer. "For what it's worth, I think what you did yesterday showing that kid mercy, that was the most officer-like thing I've seen in a long time." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. They stayed until midnight, laughing, telling stories, being people instead of Marines. By the time Elena drove home, she felt lighter than she had in days. Maybe that was the key. Not trying to carry everything alone, not trying to be perfect all the time, just being human with other humans who understood. She fell asleep quickly that night, didn't dream, didn't wake up in a cold sweat from memories, just slept, deep and dreamless and healing. The next morning she woke to find an email in her inbox from Brigadier General Matthews. "Major Rodriguez. I wanted to inform you personally that the incident from earlier this week has prompted a comprehensive review of our base culture and procedures. You will be invited to participate in a working group focused on improving professional climate for all Marines. Your input would be valuable. Additionally, I want you to know that the example you set, the grace and professionalism you demonstrated reflects the very best of Marine Corps leadership. Well done." Elena read it twice. Then she got ready for work. There were flights to brief, students to teach, a job to do. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her exhausting fight was making a difference. That the weight she carried wasn't pointless. That change, real change, might actually be possible. It wasn't much, but it was something, and sometimes something was enough to keep going. 3 weeks passed. The story should have faded by then. That's how these things usually worked. A scandal, a confrontation, then everyone moved on to the next drama. But this one stuck. Elena noticed it in small ways first. The way conversations paused when she entered rooms, then resumed with more careful words. The way junior Marines straightened up when she walked past their eyes, showing something that looked like respect, mixed with awe. The way her inbox filled with questions she'd never been asked before. "Ma'am, I'm a female corporal trying to get into flight school. Would you be willing to review my application? Major Rodriguez, my daughter wants to be a pilot. Could you speak at her high school career day? Ma'am, I'm facing some discrimination in my unit. Could I get your advice?" She tried to answer them all. Tried to be the mentor, the example, the voice of experience everyone suddenly expected her to be. But each email was another weight on shoulders already carrying too much. On a Wednesday morning, she was reviewing flight reports when Lieutenant Colonel Davidson appeared at her office door. "Elena, conference room, 5 minutes. His tone made her stomach drop. "Sir, what's this about?" "You'll see." The conference room was already full when she arrived. General Matthews sat at the head of the table. Beside him, the base sergeant major, Colonel Harrison, Dr. Lin from Equal Opportunity, Master Sergeant Kane, and 3 people Elena didn't recognize, 2 women and 1 man in business casual attire. "Major Rodriguez, thank you for joining us," Matthews said. "Please sit." Elena took the empty chair across from the strangers. Matthews gestured to them. "This is Dr. Patricia Walsh, Colonel Susan Martinez, retired, and Commander David Park from Navy Personnel Command. They're here as part of the working group I mentioned in my email, the Culture Assessment Initiative." Dr. Walsh, a woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Major Rodriguez, we've spent the last 3 weeks interviewing over 200 personnel on this base, officers, enlisted civilians, all ranks, all occupational specialties. We've compiled quite a comprehensive picture." "Of what, ma'am?" "Of how pervasive the problem is." Colonel Martinez spoke now. She was maybe 60, with the bearing of someone who'd fought these battles before. "The incident with Corporal Mitchell wasn't isolated. It was symptomatic. We found evidence of systemic bias affecting not just women, but minorities, junior personnel challenging senior assumptions, basically anyone who doesn't fit the traditional Marine combat arms profile." Elena's jaw tightened. "With respect, ma'am, I could have told you that without a 3-week study." "I'm sure you could have, Joe," Martinez said, "but now we have data, documentation, patterns we can show to skeptics who think this is just people being too sensitive." Commander Park pulled out a folder. "We found 17 separate incidents in the last year alone where female Marines were challenged about wearing their authorized uniforms or questioned about their qualifications. 12 cases of male personnel making assumptions about women's technical competence. 8 situations where women were excluded from professional development opportunities because of unstated biases." He slid papers across the table. "And that's just what people were willing to report. The actual numbers are likely much higher." Elena felt sick. She'd known it was bad, but seeing it quantified, documented, made undeniable that was different. General Matthews spoke. "Here's where you come in, Major. We're developing a comprehensive training program. Not just another PowerPoint presentation people sleep through, something interactive, scenario-based, using real incidents with identifying details changed to teach better responses." "And you want to use my incident," Elena said flatly. "We want you to help design the curriculum," Dr. Walsh corrected. "Your perspective is invaluable. You've lived this. You understand both the microaggressions and the major confrontations. You know what actually helps and what's just performative nonsense." Elena looked at Davidson. He met her eyes with an expression that said, "I know this is asking a lot, but it matters." "How much time are we talking about?" Elena asked. 4 hours a week for the next 3 months, Martinez said. "Working sessions with the development team, then pilot testing with select units, then full rollout across the base. If it works here, it'll go corps-wide." Corps-wide. That meant thousands of Marines. That meant real change. That meant her exhaustion, her trauma, her painful experience might actually prevent someone else from going through the same thing. "I'll do it," Elena said, "on one condition." Matthews raised an eyebrow. "Which is, I want Corporal Mitchell on the development team too." The room went silent. "Major," Sergeant Major Voss said carefully, "are you sure that's wise?" He made the mistake. He learned from it. He needs to be part of the solution. Elena's voice was firm, and more importantly, other Marines need to see that. Need to see that you can screw up, learn, grow, and contribute. That mistakes aren't career enders if you actually change. Martinez smiled. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Matthews nodded. Done. Sergeant Major, make it happen. After the meeting, Elena walked back to her office in a daze. This was real. This was going to be her life for the next 3 months on top of everything else. More time, more energy, more pieces of herself given away to fix a system that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Major Rodriguez? Ma'am, this is Captain Jennifer Torres. We spoke briefly 3 weeks ago. I was the one who texted you after the incident. Elena remembered. The woman from VMFA 314. Captain Torres, what can I do for you? Actually, ma'am, I was hoping I could do something for you. I heard you're heading up the Culture Assessment Working Group. I'd like to volunteer. I've got a master's degree in organizational psychology, and I've experienced my share of what we're trying to fix. Elena felt something shift. She wasn't alone in this. There were others willing to fight. Can you come by my office tomorrow at 0900? Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you. The next morning, Torres arrived precisely on time. She was 32 with the calm competence Elena associated with experienced pilots. They talked for 2 hours. Torres had ideas, good ones. Ways to make the training actually stick. Ways to measure real culture change instead of just checking boxes. The problem with most diversity training, Torres said, is that it treats symptoms instead of causes. It tells people, don't do this, without helping them understand why they think that way in the first place. So what's your solution? Cognitive reframing. You get people to examine their own assumptions, make them uncomfortable in a safe environment, show them their blind spots, then give them tools to self-correct. Torres pulled out her tablet. I've been working on a prototype. Want to see? Elena spent the next hour reviewing Torres's materials. They were good, really good. By the time Torres left, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. That afternoon, the first working group session convened. Elena Torres, Dr. Walsh, Colonel Martinez, and 3 other personnel Elena didn't know. And walking in last, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, Corporal Mitchell. He took a seat at the far end of the table. His eyes met Elena's for a brief second before skittering away. Dr. Walsh opened the session. Let's establish ground rules. First, everything said in this room stays in this room. Second, we're here to learn and improve, not to assign blame. Third, everyone's perspective matters. Rank doesn't determine whose voice is most important. She looked around the table. Now, let's start with the question everyone's probably wondering. Major Rodriguez, why did you want Corporal Mitchell on this team? All eyes turned to Elena. Because, Elena said slowly, he represents something important. He's not a monster. He's not uniquely terrible. He's a product of the culture we're trying to change. And if we can help him understand why his assumptions were wrong and give him tools to do better, then we can help others too. She looked at Mitchell directly now. Corporal, I need you to be honest in these sessions. I need you to help us understand what you were thinking, why you thought it, what could have prevented it. That's going to be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Mitchell swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good. Then let's talk about assumptions. Who wants to start? What followed was 3 hours of the most difficult, honest conversation Elena had participated in. Mitchell walked them through his thinking that day. The assumptions he'd made based on gender, the peer pressure that escalated the situation, the defensive pride that kept him digging deeper even when he knew he was wrong. I think the worst part, Mitchell said, his voice rough, was that I knew I might be wrong. When I looked at her ID and saw a major, part of me wanted to apologize right then. But I couldn't, not in front of everyone. My pride wouldn't let me back down. That's human nature, Dr. Walsh said. The sunk cost fallacy. You'd invested in a position, and admitting you were wrong felt like losing face. It was losing face, Mitchell said. I looked like a complete idiot in front of the entire mess hall. You looked like an idiot because you acted like one, Torres said bluntly. But here's the question. What would have helped you make a different choice earlier? Before it got to that point. Mitchell thought about that. If I'd had any training that made me question my assumptions. If anyone had ever told me to look at qualifications before making judgments. If I'd understood that women could be fighter pilots, that they could have combat experience, that they could be the most qualified person in any room. You never got that training, Elena asked. Not really. We got the standard EO brief at boot camp. Don't harass people, treat everyone with respect, yada yada. But it was generic. It didn't connect to real situations. It didn't make me think about my own biases. Martinez nodded, taking notes. That's exactly what we're hearing from everyone. The current training is check-the-box compliance, not actual education. They worked through lunch, built scenarios, tested approaches, challenged each other's assumptions. It was exhausting and exhilarating and occasionally painful. During a break, Mitchell approached Elena hesitantly. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you really want me on this team? I mean, really, not the official answer you gave in there. Elena considered her answer carefully. Because I believe people can change. And I need to believe that. If I don't believe it, then what's the point of any of this? If people are just stuck in their biases forever, then we're all wasting our time. But what if I don't change? What if I just learn to hide it better? Then you prove me wrong. But I don't think you will. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you're asking these questions. Because you're uncomfortable and you're still showing up anyway. Elena met his eyes. That takes courage most people don't have. Mitchell looked like he might cry. Thank you, ma'am. Over the next week, the working group met 4 more times. They developed scenarios based on real incidents, created discussion guides, built assessment tools. Torres's background in psychology proved invaluable. She understood how to structure learning experiences that actually change minds. But not everyone was on board. During one session, a master gunnery sergeant named Roberts pushed back hard. With all due respect, this feels like we're coddling people, making excuses for bad behavior. In my day, you screwed up, you got punished. End of story. We didn't need all this touchy-feely analysis. And how well did that work? Elena asked. Because if punishment alone fixed the problem, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. Roberts's jaw tightened. Ma'am, I've been in the Corps for 26 years. I've seen trends come and go. Sensitivity training, cultural awareness, diversity initiatives. They never stick. You know why? Because you can't train away human nature. People are always going to make assumptions. They're always going to have biases. That's just reality. You're right, Martinez said. We can't eliminate bias completely, but we can teach people to recognize it and correct it. We can create systems that make bias less likely to cause harm. Sounds like social engineering to me, Roberts muttered. It is, Elena said. That's exactly what it is. And that's exactly what the military has always done. We take civilians, with all their individual quirks and biases, and we engineer them into Marines who can work together effectively. This is just the next evolution of that. Roberts didn't look convinced, but he stopped arguing. That night, Elena stayed late in her office, reviewing the materials they'd developed. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. Her head ached. She was drafting yet another scenario when her phone buzzed. Text from Lisa Chen. You still at work? It's 2100. Go home. Elena looked at the clock. How had it gotten so late? She packed up her things and headed to the parking lot. The base was quiet at this hour. Most Marines were either in the barracks or off base. The flight line sat silent, dark shapes of aircraft, barely visible in the moonlight. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Her mother. Mija, why don't you ever call anymore? Mama, I'm sorry, it's been crazy here. Too crazy to call your mother, too crazy to let me know you're alive. There was hurt under the scolding. Elena leaned against her car. You're right, I'm sorry. I should have called. Your father told me what happened, with that young Marine who disrespected you. He did. Of course he did. You think we don't worry? You think we don't think about you out there dealing with all of that alone? I'm not alone, Mama. Aren't you? When was the last time you were home? When was the last time you let yourself rest? When was the last time you were just Elena? Not Major Rodriguez. Not Black Mamba. Just our daughter. The question hit harder than it should have. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I don't remember, she admitted. Come home this weekend, please. Just for 2 days. Let us take care of you for once. Elena thought about her schedule. The working group sessions. The training flights. The endless obligations. But she also thought about how tired she was. How much she needed to be just Elena for a while. Okay, she said. I'll come home. Good. I'll make your favorite. And your brother wants to see you. He has news. They talked for a few more minutes about family things, safe things, normal things. When Elena finally got off the phone and drove home, she felt lighter. The next morning, she submitted leave papers for the following weekend. Davidson approved them without question. You've been burning the candle at both ends, he said. Take the time. That's an order. The week passed in a blur of meetings and flights and working group sessions. They were making real progress on the curriculum. Even Roberts was starting to come around, offering grudging suggestions that actually improved their materials. On Friday afternoon, the working group presented their initial framework to General Matthews and his staff. Elena walked them through the 3-phase approach: awareness building, skill development, and cultural accountability. Matthews listened intently, asked sharp questions, challenged their assumptions, but by the end he was nodding. This is solid work. Much better than anything I've seen from higher headquarters. When can we pilot test it? 2 weeks, sir, Torres said. We want to refine it based on your feedback, then run it with a test group. Make it happen. Matthews looked at Elena. Major Rodriguez, this is exactly the kind of leadership the Corps needs. Well done. After the briefing, Elena felt a surge of pride mixed with exhaustion. They'd done it. They'd built something real, something that might actually make a difference. She drove home to pack for her trip. As she threw clothes into a bag, her phone buzzed. Email from Lieutenant Patterson, the young pilot from her training flight weeks ago. Ma'am, I wanted you to know that your class was the most valuable training I've received. Not just the flying that was excellent, but the way you handled yourself. The way you taught us that being a good pilot means being a good person first. I'm going to carry that lesson through my entire career. Thank you. Elena read it twice. Then she saved it in a folder she kept for days when she doubted whether any of this mattered. The drive to her parents' house took 3 hours. They lived in a small town inland, away from the coast, away from the military bases. Normal civilian life. Her mother was waiting on the front porch when Elena pulled up. She rushed down to meet her, wrapping Elena in a fierce hug. Look at you. You're too skinny. Aren't they feeding you? Mama, I'm fine. You're not fine. You're exhausted. I can see it in your eyes. Her mother pulled back, studying her face. Come inside. Your father is making dinner. Her father was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, cooking with the same precision he'd once used as a Marine. He'd retired as a master sergeant 15 years ago, but he still moved like a Marine. He looked up when Elena entered, smiled, pulled her into a hug that smelled like garlic and oregano. There's my pilot, he said. How's my Black Mamba? Tired, Papa? I bet. He went back to stirring his sauce. I heard about the working group, about the training program you're developing. That's good work, mija. Important work. It's exhausting work. The important stuff usually is. He glanced at her. But you can't do it all yourself. You know that, right? You can't carry the weight of changing the entire Corps on your own shoulders. Someone has to. No. Lots of people have to. Together. That's how change happens. Not one hero doing everything. A team of people, all pulling in the same direction. Elena leaned against the counter. When did you get so wise? About 30 years ago. You just weren't listening. He smiled. Now set the table. Your brother will be here soon with his fiancée. His what? Fiancé. That's the news your mother mentioned. Miguel is getting married. Elena felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy. Her younger brother was moving forward with his life, building something, while she was stuck fighting the same battles over and over. Miguel arrived 20 minutes later with a bright-eyed woman named Sophia, who was a third-grade teacher. They were clearly in love, the kind of easy, comfortable love that came from actually knowing each other, not just the romance. Over dinner, they told the story of the proposal. How Miguel had planned this elaborate thing at the beach, but had gotten so nervous, he'd just blurted it out in the parking lot. How Sophia had said yes before he even finished the question. Everyone laughed. It was normal. It was human. It was everything Elena's life wasn't. After dinner, Miguel found Elena alone on the back porch. "You okay, sis?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "About how you're building a life, a real life, and I'm still just fighting." Miguel sat down next to her. "You're doing important things, Elena, things that matter." "Do they?" "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just tilting at windmills, if anything I'm doing actually changes anything." "You changed that corporal. From what Dad told me, you changed how he sees the world. That's not nothing. It's one person. One person at a time is how change happens." Miguel bumped her shoulder with his. "You can't see it because you're in the middle of it. But you're making waves, Elena, big ones. People are watching you, learning from you, becoming better because of you." "It's lonely," Elena admitted, "being the example all the time, never getting to just be human." "Then be human here, this weekend. No Major Rodriguez, no Black Mamba, just Elena, our sister, Papa's daughter, Mama's baby girl." Elena felt tears on her cheeks. She hadn't realized she was crying. Miguel pulled her into a hug. "You don't have to be strong all the time. Not here. Not with us." They sat there for a long time. The night air was cool. Stars appeared overhead. Inside, their parents were arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to do dishes. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt like she could breathe. The weekend passed too quickly. Family dinners, board games, a trip to the farmer's market, normal things, human things. By Sunday evening, when it was time to drive back to base, Elena felt more centered than she had in months. Her mother packed her enough food for a week. Her father hugged her and whispered, "I'm proud of you, mija. Not because you're Black Mamba, because you're you." On the drive back, Elena thought about Miguel's words, one person at a time. Maybe that was enough. Maybe she didn't have to change the entire Corps overnight. Maybe small changes multiplied across thousands of Marines would eventually add up to something big. Her phone buzzed with a text from Torres' test group confirmed for Wednesday. "You ready?" Elena smiled and typed back, "Ready." She was ready. Not because she wasn't tired, not because it wasn't hard, but because it mattered. Because somewhere a young woman was dreaming of being a pilot. Because somewhere a Marine was learning to see past their assumptions. Because change was possible even if it came one person, one moment, one difficult conversation at a time. The base gates appeared ahead. Elena showed her ID. The guard waved her through. She was back. Back to being Major Rodriguez. Back to being Black Mamba. Back to carrying the weight. But now she remembered something important. She didn't have to carry it alone. There were others. Torres, Davidson, Martinez. Even Mitchell transformed from antagonist to ally. They were building something together, something that might outlast all of them. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Wednesday morning arrived with heavy clouds threatening rain. Elena stood in front of the conference room where they'd conduct the first pilot test of the new training program. 40 Marines sat in rows of chairs representing every rank from private to lieutenant colonel, every occupational specialty from infantry to logistics to aviation. The test group. Torres stood beside her reviewing notes on her tablet. "You nervous?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. "Good, means you care." Torres looked up. "Remember, we're not here to preach. We're here to facilitate learning. Let them do the work." General Matthews entered with Sergeant Major Voss. The room snapped to attention. Carry on, Matthews said. He took a seat in the back corner. Observer status, but his presence changed everything. Everyone would be watching their reactions, calibrating their own responses based on what the general thought. Elena walked to the front of the room. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered. Good morning. I'm Major Elena Rodriguez. Over the next 3 hours, we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. We're going to examine assumptions you might not know you have. We're going to talk about incidents that make people defensive. And we're going to do it all with the understanding that we're here to learn, not to judge. She paused, making eye contact around the room. Some of you know who I am. Some of you know the story of what happened in this building's mess hall 6 weeks ago. That incident is part of why we're here today. But this isn't about me. This is about all of us. About building a core where everyone can serve to their full potential without fighting through assumptions about what they can or can't do based on factors that have nothing to do with competence. A hand went up. A staff sergeant, male, probably early 30s. Yes, Staff Sergeant. Ma'am, with respect, isn't this just political correctness run amok? Are we really supposed to pretend there aren't differences between men and women between different groups? The challenge came earlier than Elena expected. But Torres had prepared her for this. Staff Sergeant, what's your name? Johnson, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Johnson, you're right. There are differences. Physical differences, statistical differences, cultural differences. The question isn't whether differences exist. The question is, should those differences determine who gets opportunities, who gets respect, who gets believed when they show up wearing the uniform they earned? Johnson shifted in his seat. I just think we're spending a lot of time on problems that might not be as big as people claim. Corporal Mitchell, can you stand up, please? Mitchell, sitting 3 rows back, stood. His face was pale. Corporal Mitchell made a mistake 6 weeks ago. A big one. He challenged my authority and my right to wear my uniform based entirely on his assumptions. Corporal, do you want to tell everyone what you were thinking that day? Mitchell's voice was rough. I saw a woman in a flight jacket. I assumed she was a dependent wearing her husband's gear. I assumed she didn't belong. I never looked at her rank, never looked at her patches, never considered that my assumptions might be wrong. Why not? Elena asked gently. Because I'd never seen a female fighter pilot before. In my world, they didn't exist. So when I saw one, my brain couldn't process it. It was easier to believe she was fake than to update my understanding of reality. Elena nodded. Thank you, Corporal. You can sit. She addressed the room. That's what we're here to fix. Not differences. Assumptions. The gap between what we think we know and what's actually true. The next hour flew by. They worked through scenarios. A female mechanic being questioned about her technical knowledge. A minority officer being mistaken for enlisted. A junior Marine's idea being ignored until a senior Marine repeated it. Each scenario sparked discussion, argument, uncomfortable recognition. Elena watched people's faces as understanding dawned. Watched them realize they'd made similar assumptions, done similar things. During a break, a young Lance Corporal approached Elena. Female, maybe 21. Ma'am, can I tell you something? Of course. I've been in for 2 years. Every day someone asks me if I'm sure I want to be a mechanic, if it's too hard, if I wouldn't be happier in admin. They don't ask the male mechanics that. They just assume we belong there. Her voice cracked. I'm good at my job, really good, but I'm so tired of proving it every single day. Elena felt the words like a physical blow, because she knew. She knew that exhaustion down to her bones. What's your name? Lance Corporal Maria Santos, ma'am. Lance Corporal Santos, I need you to remember something. Your competence doesn't require their validation. You know you're good. Your immediate supervisors know you're good. That's what matters. The people who doubt you, that's their limitation, not yours. Santos blinked back tears. Thank you, ma'am. After the break, Torres took over, running them through cognitive exercises designed to reveal hidden biases. The room got quieter, more thoughtful. People were genuinely engaging with the material. Then came the final scenario. Torres presented it without preamble. You're a senior Marine. You walk into the gym and see someone in civilian clothes working out. They're using equipment wrong in a way that could cause injury. What do you do? Hands went up around the room. I'd correct them, one sergeant said. Same? Another agreed. Torres nodded. Now, same scenario, but the person working out is a senior officer. What do you do? The hands came down. Uncomfortable silence. That's different, someone muttered. Why? Torres pressed. They're still at risk of injury. They still need correction. But now rank creates hesitation. Now you're weighing the consequences of speaking up against the consequences of staying silent. She let that sit for a moment. That's what many female Marines face every day. That calculation. Do I correct this wrong assumption? Do I challenge this inappropriate comment, or do I stay silent because speaking up has its own costs? Staff Sergeant Johnson, the one who'd challenged Elena earlier, raised his hand. I never thought about it that way, he said quietly. I thought women who complained were being oversensitive. But you're right. They're doing that calculation constantly. That's exhausting. Yes, Elena said. It is. The session ended at 1200 hours. General Matthews stood. Outstanding work. Every Marine in this room learned something today. I know I did. He looked at Elena and Torres. This needs to go Corps-wide. I'll be recommending it to Headquarters Marine Corps this afternoon. After everyone filed out, Matthews approached Elena privately. Major, I have a question for you. It's not an order, just a question. Sir, how would you feel about taking this program on the road? Spending 6 months traveling to different bases, training trainers, ensuring quality control. Elena's first instinct was to refuse, 6 months away from flying. 6 months as the face of this initiative, instead of a pilot who happened to be involved. But then she thought about Lance Corporal Santos, about the dozens of messages she'd received from female Marines thanking her, about the possibility of changing the experience for thousands of Marines she'd never meet. Can I think about it, sir? Take a week. Let me know. Matthews paused. For what it's worth, I think you're exactly the right person for this. Not because of your story, because of how you've handled everything since. The grace, the leadership, the commitment to actually solving the problem instead of just complaining about it. After he left, Torres found Elena staring at the empty conference room. He asked you to take it on the road, didn't he? How did you know? Because it's what I'd do if I were him. You're the proof that the system can work, that you can fight through the bias and still succeed. People need to see that. I'm tired of being proof, Elena said. I want to just be a pilot. I know, but that's not the hand you got dealt. Torres sat down. Look, I'll be honest with you. If you say no, they'll find someone else. The program will still happen, but it won't be as effective, because you're not just teaching curriculum. You're showing people what right looks like, what grace under pressure actually means. Elena closed her eyes. I need to fly Jennifer. I need to be in the cockpit. That's where I make sense. That's where I'm just Elena, not Black Mamba, not a symbol, just a pilot doing her job. Then negotiate. Tell Matthews you'll do it if you can maintain flight status, if you can instruct part-time, if you can keep 1 foot in the cockpit while doing this work. It was a good idea, a compromise that might let Elena keep her identity while serving this larger mission. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment with a glass of wine and her phone. She scrolled through messages from the past 6 weeks, dozens of them, from people she'd never met. Thank you for showing my daughter that women can be fighter pilots. Your example gave me the courage to report harassment in my unit. I'm a male Marine, and your story made me realize how often I've made assumptions about my female colleagues. I'm working to do better. Each message was a reminder that her exhaustion mattered, that her fight was changing things for people she'd never know. Her phone rang. Lisa Chen. Have you decided? Lisa asked without preamble. How do you know about the offer? Davidson told me. Said Matthews wants you for the road show. Said you're thinking about it. I don't know if I can do it, Lisa. 6 months of being Black Mamba everywhere I go. 6 months of reliving that mess hall confrontation in every training session. I'm barely holding it together as it is. Then don't hold it together. Let yourself fall apart a little. Let people see that you're human. That might be the most important lesson of all. Elena laughed bitterly. Right. Show weakness while trying to convince people I'm competent. That'll work great. I'm serious. The problem with being a legend is that legends aren't human. They're untouchable, unreachable. They don't inspire people to try because people think, I could never do that. But if you show them that you struggle, that you get tired and scared and uncertain, then they think, maybe I could do that. Maybe I'm stronger than I think. The words hit Elena hard because Lisa was right. The legend was isolating. The humanity was connecting. I'll think about it, Elena said. That's all I ask. The next morning, Elena woke to an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, from one of the 12. She opened it. Major Rodriguez, you don't know me. My name is James Walsh. I was one of the Marines you saved in the Euphrates Valley, the saw gunner on Reaper 2. I've wanted to write this email for 7 years but never had the courage. That night, I was certain I was going to die. We all were. We'd made peace with it, said our prayers, written our last letters in our heads. And then you appeared. Just your voice on the radio at first, calm, steady, telling us you were coming, telling us to trust you. I've never told anyone this, but when you made those gun runs, I cried. Not from fear, from relief, from disbelief that someone could fly like that, could be that good, could care enough about 12 Marines she'd never met to risk everything. You gave me 7 more years. 7 years I've used to get married, finish college, have a daughter. Her name is Elena. My wife and I named her after you. Because you're the reason she exists. I heard about what happened at Miramar, about that corporal who challenged you, about how you showed him grace instead of destroying him. That's the same person who saved us. Someone who sees the humanity in everyone, even when they don't deserve it. I don't know what you're going through right now, but I wanted you to know that your life matters. Not just your flying. You, the person you are, the grace you show, the standard you set. You changed my life. You changed my daughter's life. You changed the lives of 11 other Marines and everyone who loves us. Thank you for everything. Elena read the email 3 times. Her vision blurred with tears. She thought about that night, about the fear that had lived in her bones during those 90 seconds, about the certainty that she was going to fail, going to kill the people she was trying to save. But she hadn't failed, and those 12 Marines had gotten their 7 years. And one of them had a daughter named Elena, who existed because of a choice made in darkness and terror. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that made all of it, the exhaustion, the assumptions, the constant fight, worth it. She picked up her phone and called General Matthews' office. Sir, it's Major Rodriguez. About your offer. I have a counteroffer. Matthews listened to her proposal. 6 months on the road but maintaining flight currency. Teaching the program, but also flying at each base she visited. Being both instructor and pilot, both symbol and human. Done, Matthews said. When can you start? Give me 2 weeks to get my affairs in order. You've got it. Thank you, Major. The Corps is lucky to have you. After she hung up, Elena sat in silence. She'd just committed to 6 more months of being Black Mamba. 6 more months of carrying the weight. But this time it felt different. This time she wasn't alone. This time she had Torres and Davidson and Lisa and Martinez and even Mitchell all pulling in the same direction. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Elena flew as much as she could, storing up the feeling of the cockpit, the freedom of the sky. She worked with Torres to refine the training materials. She said goodbye to her students, watching them graduate and move on to fleet squadrons. Lieutenant Patterson sought her out on his last day. Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for everything. You taught me how to fly, but more importantly, you taught me how to lead. You did that yourself, Lieutenant. I just showed you the standard. The standard is who you are, not just what you teach. He hesitated. I'm going to VMFA 323, Death Rattlers. Going to fly combat missions someday, probably. And when I do, I'm going to remember everything you taught me. The technical stuff, sure. But also the other stuff. About seeing people for who they are. About grace under pressure. About being the kind of leader who makes everyone better. After he left, Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. She wasn't just teaching flying anymore. She was shaping the next generation of leaders. and that mattered more than any individual mission. On her last day before the roadshow began, Elena stood on the flight line at sunset. The orange light painted the Hornets in gold and shadow. She'd spent so much of her life in and around these aircraft. They were home in a way nothing else was. Her phone buzzed. Text from her father. "Miha, your mother and I are proud of you. Not just for what you're doing, but for who you are. Remember that when it gets hard. Remember that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself." Elena smiled through sudden tears. Typed back, "Thank you, Papa. I love you." That night, she packed for the first leg of the tour. Camp Pendleton, then 29 Palms, then Lejeune, then Quantico. 6 months of travel. 6 months of telling her story. 6 months of being Black Mamba. But also 6 months of changing minds. 6 months of building something that would outlast her. 6 months of making sure that the next Lance Corporal Santos, the next female pilot, the next Marine who didn't fit the traditional mold would have an easier path than Elena had. The first session at Camp Pendleton was standing room only. 200 Marines packed into an auditorium. Elena walked to the podium and looked out at all those faces. "My name is Major Elena Rodriguez," she began. "7 years ago, I flew a mission that changed my life. Not because it was glamorous or heroic, but because it taught me something fundamental about who I am and what I'm capable of. Today I'm going to tell you that story, not the legend version, the real version. The version where I was terrified and uncertain and convinced I was going to fail." She told them about the radio call, about the 12 desperate voices, about the decision to go in dry, about the 90 seconds that felt like hours, about the shaking hands and the hammering heart, and the absolute certainty that she was going to kill someone. "But I didn't fail," she said. "I got lucky. Improbably lucky. And those 12 Marines went home. And for 7 years I carried that mission like a badge of honor. Like proof that I belonged. Like evidence that I was good enough." She paused. "But 6 weeks ago, a young corporal looked at me and decided I didn't belong. Decided I was wearing stolen valor. Decided that no matter what my patches said, no matter what my rank was, I couldn't possibly be a fighter pilot. Because I'm a woman. And in his world, women didn't do that." Yet the room was silent. Here's what I learned from that confrontation. Competence isn't enough. Excellence isn't enough. You can be the best at what you do, and people will still make assumptions, will still doubt you, will still challenge your right to exist in spaces they think belong to them. She let that sink in. So what do we do about it? We could get angry, could demand that people change, could punish everyone who makes a mistake, or we could do the harder thing. We could educate, could show grace, could create a culture where everyone, regardless of gender, race, background, gets judged on their actual merit instead of assumptions. The training session that followed was electric. Marines engaged, challenged, learned. Elena watched faces change as understanding dawned. Watched the same transformation she'd seen at Miramar replicate itself here. After it ended, a young private approached her. Female, barely out of boot camp. "Ma'am, I'm in the infantry. I'm one of the first women in a combat unit. Every day is hard. Every day someone questions whether I belong. Your story gives me hope that it gets better." Elena looked at this young Marine and saw herself 15 years ago. Full of determination, full of fear, ready to prove herself, but not yet understanding the cost. "It gets different," Elena said honestly. "Not easier. You get stronger. You learn to carry the weight. You learn which battles to fight and which to let go. You learn that your worth doesn't depend on whether everyone validates it." Does the doubt ever stop? No, but your certainty gets louder. You stop needing their approval because you know what you've earned. The private nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am." That conversation repeated itself across the 6 months. Different bases, different faces, same story. Marines struggling with assumptions. Marines learning to see past bias. Marines becoming better versions of themselves. Elena flew at every base. Kept her hands on the stick. Kept her identity as a pilot even while doing this other work. And slowly, she found balance. found a way to be both Black Mamba and Elena, both symbol and human. In month 4, she got an email from Corporal Mitchell. "Ma'am, I wanted to update you on my progress. I've been leading discussions in my unit about bias and assumptions, using my own story as an example. At first, everyone thought I was crazy, but slowly, people started to get it, started to examine their own thinking. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to prevent others from making the same mistake. Thank you for giving me that chance." Elena saved that email next to the one from James Walsh, evidence that grace worked, that people could change, that the exhausting fight was worth it. By month 6, the program had been approved for Corps-wide implementation. Elena had trained over 200 facilitators who would carry it to every base and unit. The work would continue without her. On her last day of the tour, she stood in front of a room of instructors at Quantico. These were the people who would carry the mission forward. "This is bigger than any one person," Elena told them. "Bigger than my story or anyone else's. This is about building a core where everyone can serve to their full potential, where competence matters more than assumptions, where grace is stronger than punishment." She paused. "Some of you will face resistance. Some people will call this political correctness or social engineering or a waste of time. Don't argue with them. Show them. Show them through example, through results, through the undeniable evidence that teams perform better when everyone is valued." When the session ended, Elena drove back to Miramar, back to her squadron, back to flying full-time. The 6 months had changed her. She was tired in new ways, but also stronger, more certain of her purpose. Davidson welcomed her back with a smile. "How does it feel to be just a pilot again?" "Like coming home," Elena said. But she wasn't just a pilot anymore. She'd never be just a pilot again. She was Black Mamba. She was the standard. She was the example thousands of Marines looked to. And that was okay, because she'd learned to carry it without letting it crush her. 2 months after returning, Elena was walking across the flight line when she saw a familiar figure. Lance Corporal Santos, the young mechanic who'd spoken to her at the first training session. "Ma'am," Santos jogged over. "I wanted to tell you I got selected for corporal, and my supervisor wrote in my evaluation that I'm the best young mechanic he's worked with in 10 years. Elena felt pride surge through her. "That's outstanding, Santos. You earned it." "I did. But your words helped me believe I could. Helped me stop doubting myself just because other people doubted me." Santos smiled. "Thank you, ma'am." After Santos left, Elena stood on the flight line and watched Hornets take off into the evening sky. She thought about all the Marines she'd met, all the conversations she'd had, all the small moments of change multiplied across thousands of lives. She thought about James Walsh's daughter named Elena, who existed because of a choice made in terror and darkness. About Lieutenant Patterson carrying her lessons into combat leadership. About Santos believing in her own competence. About Mitchell transformed from antagonist to advocate. She thought about the legend of Black Mamba and the reality of Elena Rodriguez and how they'd finally, after all these years, learned to coexist. The sun set over the flight line, painting everything gold. Elena turned and walked toward the ready room. Tomorrow there would be flights to brief students to teach the endless work of being both pilot and leader and example. But tonight, she let herself feel it. The satisfaction of knowing that her exhausting fight had mattered. That the weight she carried had purpose. That grace given freely, even when undeserved, could change not just individuals, but entire cultures. She'd laughed at her call sign once, that young recon Marine who'd given it to her. "Black Mamba," he'd said, "you fly with the devil's luck and the precision of a snake." But it wasn't luck. It was skill. It was training. It was choosing to be better than good enough, even when good enough would have been excusable. It was grace under pressure. It was competence that couldn't be denied. It was the standard she set, not just for others, but for herself. And that standard visible in every patch she wore, every flight she flew, every Marine she taught, every moment of grace she offered to people who didn't deserve it. That standard was her true legacy, not the legend, not the story people told. but the thousands of small changes rippling outward from her choices making the core better for everyone who came after. She'd been Black Mamba in the cockpit that night 7 years ago, but she'd become Black Mamba in life through everything that followed, through the fight, through the exhaustion, through the choice to keep showing up, keep proving herself, keep being excellent even when excellence wasn't enough. And now finally she understood that being Black Mamba wasn't a burden she carried. It was who she'd chosen to become. And that choice made new every single day was what transformed assumptions into respect, ignorance into understanding, and one Marine's exhausting fight into a legacy that would outlive them all.